Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Just Sell webinar series here at ESX School of Management. I am the host, Professor Deva Rangarajan. And today we have a very, very interesting guest who is putting forth some very interesting ideas about how sales is going to move in the future, adapt to new technologies and everything else. So I have the pleasure of having Patrick Maes, who is a serial entrepreneur and a serial book writer. And right now, he has decided to spend some time with KPMG in Belgium, where he has a very lengthy title, but it boils down to taking care of clients, how marketing has an impact on that, and what works with sales, and what are the role of technologies. So, Patrick, thank you so much for taking the time. And the first thing I would love for you to say to the audience is, what is your current title, sir?
Okay, Devan, thank you for having me and for inviting me to this interview. My title at KPMG is Head of Customer Sales Marketing and Innovation Advisory.
Wow, there you go.
It's a very long title. Luckily, we live in times where you no longer need business cards because I would need an extra large format for that. But it is an interesting combination. And it is, I think, in line with what everybody is observing. That means that the lines between sales, marketing, customer service are blurring. Many people start now to refer to commercial as an overarching title. And I think it was a very good idea of KPMG to bring those elements together into one practice, which they then asked me to develop in Belgium. And also very interesting to combine it with innovation, because this allows us to bring in a lot of accelerators. And typical accelerators are, for example, the use of AI, the use of new ways of working, and so on. So that is the study of my title.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things, of course, I'm sure that why KPMG had you, of course, right? I'm sure there are a lot of very good people working on it as well, because of the fact that I know you from quite some time before. And I remember when you were one of the first people shouting from the top of the rooftops in a very conservative market like Belgium, where you were talking about marketing automation is something we should be looking into, when they were still saying, hey, what is he talking about? But and now fast forward 4, 5, 6 years, you see that that becomes almost the mantra for every kind of business to business organization right now. And along the same lines, now you came out with a new book called Disruptive Selling, which of course I say new, but it's been around for quite some time right now, where you kind of talk about how the role of technology is pushing the sales and marketing frontier, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about what this disruptive selling is about?
Okay, well, the basic idea of disruptive selling is that marketing, sales, and customer service are changing rapidly, not only driven by changing customer expectations, but also by the possibilities you have with technology and the way of organizing people and organizing processes. So there are a number of trends that I've detected. I didn't detect them myself because everybody was detecting them. I just took the effort of writing it together on a couple of pages, and that then became a book. But there are some elements of change that are going on. And the basic principle behind disruptive selling is that at regular instances, you really start from a white page. Because the idea is that if you would start your company again today, would your sales, your marketing, your customer service, and the technology you use to enable sales, marketing, and service be exactly the same as the organizational structure, the processes, and the technology that you are using today, or would it be completely different? I'm quite sure that the answer would be, with all the things that are around today, it would be different. So the concept that I'm promoting with disruptive selling is that if you are a sales leader, if you are responsible for a business, if you're a CEO, it really makes sense every year, preferably every 6 months, to do a white page exercise and to say, okay, let's look at what is our value proposition, what are the market dynamics that are influencing our success, and what are the new developments that could help us to work more efficient and to work faster and to accelerate sales, marketing, and customer velocity and experience. And then, of course, it is not the idea to implement everything, but when you do this exercise, you then can compare it with your actual legacy system today, and you can try to identify, okay, what are the programs that we should be thinking about? And that, of course, then comes with an exercise: start, stop, and continue. Because continue with things that are good. You need to realize after such an exercise that there are some things that you've been using or doing for years that you better would stop. And there are a number of things that you should start. But starting those things will require integration in the rest of your processes, your IT and so on, your tech stack, and will also require a certain level of project management. So this is a kind of an ongoing rejuvenation of your commercial roadmap.
Indeed.
To make sure that what you do is future-proof.
Indeed. But one of the things, and I've had the privilege of actually sitting in on your presentation as well, Patrick, is one of the things which I really took away, which is very interesting, seems very obvious, but so hard for companies, is your idea of experimentation, right? Try experiments, right? Tell us a little bit more about what is this experimentation, and why should business leaders, let's not talk about all businesses, let's just talk about marketing and sales leaders, right? Let's not, churn the whole ocean. Let's not boil the whole ocean. Let's talk about what we can actually do. Why should marketing and sales leaders think about experimenting, and what is this experimenting about? Yeah,
so the experimentation comes from the culture of experimentation. It's a concept from innovation, where the idea is that when you are a front runner, you will try certain things that haven't been tried before. You may be the very first to actually take something live, or you may be a pioneer in your industry to do something. And then, of course, taking into account business logic and doing a business in a responsible way, you're not going to implement those experimental things, those new things at large scale immediately. So the idea is to define a number of MVPs, minimal viable products or minimal viable projects, where at a very limited scale, with a limited number of clients, limited number of prospects, involvement of a limited number of people from your organization, at this limited scale, you're going to try something. And of course, you're going to mitigate risk, but at a certain point, you need to jump and you need to do it. And if it doesn't work, okay, you can go back and no damage is done. And that means that with many of the customers that I work with, we have those MVPs, those experimental projects, and we go as far as to communicate with clients that we are trying something new. And we just tell the client, we say, hey, we are trying to give you a better customer experience. We are trying to better find out what kind of content or what kind of customer success input would be useful to you. But we are involving, for example, artificial intelligence. We are involving data signals tracking and stuff like that. And perhaps in the following 2 or 3 weeks, it may go a little bit wrong. So please tell us. But we do all this with the intention of giving you a better experience, of making working with us easier. And that is the concept of experimentation.
I love this indeed. Patrick, so it's very interesting, right? Because you're talking about experimentation, and in my experience, and then I would love your opinion on it as well, right? When we talk about experimentation with clients, okay, you're going to have a particular segment of your clients saying, okay, because they are the ones who want to be one step ahead of their competition, right? But a lot of times, these very leaders who are okay with you experimenting sometimes forget that experimentation would then result in changing of processes within their own organization. And my question to you is, how many of the leaders that you talk to now are also willing to implement the same experiments within their own organization? And that's something that I'm very curious to hear your experiences about, because you talked about AI, right? So AI could change the customer experience, but in order to provide that changing experience, there has to be changes to your working processes internally. And that involves people, right? So how many leaders actually are okay with experimenting I don't want numbers, right? But your experience with that.
Well, it is something, there are companies and clients and CEOs and chief commercial officers, chief marketing officers, when I bring the use of AI to the table, they already freeze a little bit. They say, "Oh, here we go again." It is the same experience that I had 15 years ago when I wanted to actually stop the dynamics of a meeting. There was just one word I need to say, that was CRM.
Yeah.
And when I said CRM 15 years ago, it's a long time ago, everybody said, "Oh, all this nonsense, come on."
Yeah.
There again, they're trying to push this new concept. And it is exactly the same with using AI. But it requires the right kind of explanation, and it needs to be brought back to tangible stuff. There is one form there are a number of forms of AI that we see that are easily brought into a conversation, and that then easily also are included in some testing. And of course, when the testing is successful, they become embedded in the processes and the ways of working. One of them is the use of AI to scan market information and to scan profiles. Tools, for example, like Saley.ai, that is a tool that allows you to read in milliseconds annual reports, documents, and so on, that can map in a couple of milliseconds decision-making units and so on. It isn't really engaging immediately with your clients, but it is an enormous time saver for your clients, for your salespeople and your team. Other things are tools, for example, for sentiment tracking in calls, used in contact centers, where people that are working in a contact center, based on the trembling of the voice, they can see whether their counterpart in the conversation is relaxed, is stressed, is bored, and things like that. And it works with colored bands, very simple. And it allows to bring some more empathy into the conversation, what a lot of companies are working on. On the other hand, if you start talking about more advanced AI, where you would say, okay, hey, there are possibilities where you can make a body double or an AI double of your business development person. And the AI, we can give it a fancy name, or we can give it the same name as your business development manager. And this bot will not only research, but will also send mails, will send follow-up mails, will book appointments, and even at a certain point will engage in the conversation with a potential client. Then you really need people with a pioneering spirit to even continue the conversation. But there are different levels, and it is, I think, in every company, in every industry, there are pioneers. There are people that are early adopters, and then there are people that will follow when they see a certain success, and then you have everybody that wants to come aboard. And it was the same with marketing automation. It is the same with customer data platforms, and I imagine it will just be the same with artificial intelligence in sales, marketing, and service.
Indeed. Now, what really struck me was one of the things that you said was, let's say, for example, making a hologram. I heard one presentation where they talk about making a hologram of a BDR or an AE, business development rep, or an inside salesperson, right? Let's, whatever your company decides to call them, right? Or even have some of your field sales record messages with holograms and actually leave messages to your clients, and that's something but that might seem, while it might seem like almost too futuristic, but there was a couple of things that I heard in a recent conference where I saw your presentation. We saw a presentation by Gong talking about conversation intelligence and increasingly moving towards revenue intelligence, where they were talking about, they were beginning to experiment, saying that, okay, based on what words were being used by the client in a call, can then automatically, there could be preconceived templates and the exact wording of the client. And you also happen to mention, can you give us a little bit more of an idea about what is possible there? What is it that you were thinking about?
Well, from the first day that I saw Gong, my life changed. It's something like, basically, it is just like with marketing automation. I saw the light with Marketo, who today is integrated in Adobe and so on. And with AI in sales, I saw the light with Gong.
Yeah.
Because the concept of Gong is that Gong listens into conversations and in real time identifies winning and losing sentences and wordings, and communicates those winning and losing sentences to the rest of the team. So imagine going back to a traditional organization where you have a team leader or a coach or a sales manager that has a delay of perhaps a week or longer to figure out what are now the winning conversations and what are the losing conversations, what are the words to use, what are the examples to use, what is the tone of voice. So this works as a fantastic accelerator. Looking at the use of holograms, because I saw the same one, because I'm a big believer in AR and VR. I've been trying to apply AR and VR in business-to-business sales. And we did some pretty advanced work before I joined KPMG, where in industrial selling, we actually allowed the engineers and the clients to use VR to walk around into installations and machinery they were discussing, whole plants, where they could actually pinpoint points where they wanted further information and so on. Later on, the setup was used to train the operators months before the plant operated. But today, all this is already standard. But the use of making a hologram of yourself, it is fun and it really looks nice. But then, of course, the question is when to use it. And I imagine it is something that at this point in time works with certain companies. Let's say that you are launching a very innovative concept in HR, marketing, or whatever, and you want to distinguish yourself from the others because all the others have a nice website and they have customer success approach and they have videos and you have all these things. Then you can say, okay, hey, why don't we use these holograms to do something? And people will say, hey, these are the people that sell their stuff using holograms. It's fun. So there are a lot of interesting possibilities now. I think in general, going back a little bit in time and going back for me today is going back 3 years. It's no longer any use of going back longer than that because things are changing so fast. A couple of years ago, 3 years ago, sales enablement was all about Showpad. And Showpad is a great thing. And I think that every company that really wants to work in sales in a decent way should have Showpad or a similar application, but Showpad is absolutely market leader, very well structured. If you look what the possibilities are today, you see that new technologies are coming up, like the holograms and stuff like that, that can deliver a different kind of customer experience. Because that is one of the things that I observed when in my role at KPMG, where customer experience design became part of my responsibility, that customer experience design is an essential element in everything which has to do with sales, marketing, and customer service. And of course, it makes sense, but it is another way of thinking. And then you observe that in general, people have no time. People are easily bored. And what is for you the biggest thing in the world, your product, selling your product, is for them a very little blip on their agenda and on the things they need to decide. So you better make it interesting, you better turn it into an experience, and you better make the message very snappy so that people understand what you try to convey.
Indeed. Very, very, very interesting. Now, if you look at this, Patrick, it's not that far away, right? Because now people were talking about things like video messaging, right? Forget holograms, right? They were talking, we went from voicemails to the point where there are companies right now which are talking about, there's companies like OneMob, there is Vidyard, there is BombBomb, all these companies which talk about video messaging and stuff like that. And they were talking about using video messaging or pre-recorded messages for account-based marketing, right? So essentially, where a sales rep might not have the time to go visit a client. So my point is that if that is going to become the norm, AI and creating deep fakes, the only thing, the ethical issue is, am I going to use, if it's Deva and Deva's deep fake, or Deva's no longer working for the company?
Yes.
But guess what? I have Deva's recordings and I can create deep fakes, and that becomes an ethical issue, right? And that's one of the last things I want to touch upon there as well. But it's not that far-fetched, right? If you think about how you're thinking about using video messaging for account-based marketing, that you can also look at holograms as a way of trying to look at it, or like a presence. Let's say the very example that you were giving, like we're talking about augmented reality, and you have, let's say, for example, a service person or somebody talking to a client, and then I don't know if it's possible, but then you need to make a sales pitch there or make something there that the hologram could be kind of introduced there, where you can say, hey, here's a salesperson coming and saying, does this answer your questions? You know what I mean? Kind of things. I'm also imagining that where you can think about that. I don't know if that's possible, but that is very interesting. So what are your thoughts on the fact that we already have ABMs, account-based marketing, where they're talking about using videos of people recording it rather than just sending out documents? So do you think that even the idea of video-based messaging, where are we today without AI?
I absolutely believe in it, because there is a concept. I try to do a little bit, let's call it research, but of course it's not academic level of research, but I try to do some research related to generational profiles and their expectations in customer experience and the way they use digital interaction. And I try to read a lot about it, and I have in my team a couple of people that do research on that and so on. And at a certain point, somebody came up with the concept of the preference for asynchronous communication. And that was an interesting one. It said, okay, as of a certain generation, let's say people younger than 25 years old or something, they have a preference for texting, not because they like texting, but because texting is asynchronous. And there is quite some research about it. There are some articles about it, why people prefer asynchronous communication. And the first thing makes a lot of sense. You digest the message or the content in your own time. But the second thing is, you decide yourself when to react. And so basically, and it comes then, the research is also about how younger people in their emotional, in their love life and so on communicate. If you do everything face-to-face or in telephone, old style, somebody says something and you need to answer. And if you don't answer, there's a problem. Hey, you're not answering. What is this? But if you can manage part of your relationship, love life, private life, business, asynchronically, you can send a certain message, you can reflect, and you can react. So I'm a big fan of bringing in asynchronic messaging. And the best way of asynchronic messaging is, of course, video, because in video, you have more levels. You have the body language, you have more content. It's much richer than the traditional assets that you use in ABM. So I think it certainly should be part of everybody's way of working with customer success assets, with marketing assets, and so on. And it is, of course, also a huge efficiency gain.
Absolutely. And that for me is that I think the fact is that if we talk about this, Patrick, it looks like we can go on for hours, but I'm going to kind of, in the interest of time, I'm going to come back to two main questions that I want to kind of finish this with. One is, you, in your book, you talk about the hockey stick model and of selling, and how we went from caveman selling, I think that's what you call it, caveman selling, to futuristic selling and disruptive selling that you talk about, and where disruptive is more about experimentation. So I was paying attention, Patrick, just to give you that. But one of the things you talk about is where you talk about the future is where you could have bot-based selling. You talk about bots selling. Now, this is very provocative. Do you think that that's also applicable in business to business? And is it also applicable for complex solutions, like for KPMG itself, right? To sell complex, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
It is something I tried to structure the thinking about it, but the idea came when I had conversations with energy companies. And at a certain point, you discover that every energy company is in a number of countries, and Belgium is one of them, where people can fairly easily change energy provider. If you then start doing research in what drives the decisions on changing energy provider, you discover that basically the energy provider is relatively low interest. And that's a pity, of course, if you're the marketeer of an energy provider, because you spend a lot of time, a lot of passion, a lot of money in creating a brand. But in the end of the day, people say, well, this is electricity. And I want electricity that is cheap, that is reliable, and probably that's green. That could be, it's an increasing important element. So the idea is there that one of the scenarios we worked on is, okay, perhaps in the future, every household will have a bot, a kind of a butler service that takes care of organizing the utilities. And that bot reaches out constantly to energy providers and says, okay, hey, what is your best deal today? Or even what is your best deal for the next hour? And then engages with the energy companies and ensures that there is always power. And then, of course, we took that idea a little bit further and we said, okay, let's list a little bit what are low involvement decisions that people need to make. And then you get things on the radar like insurance. There are certain insurance that come with involvement and passion. If you talk working with an insurance company about savings, building your pension, wealth management, that is passion. But on the other hand, if you want an insurance when you drive a step, it's not that you're going to be passionate or thrilled about the insurance company. And so you also see there, and it is already, when today you take a step in Brussels or Antwerp or whatever, or you take an electric scooter or a bicycle, you actually are insured as long as you drive. And the insurance stopped when you lock the thing. So basically, this is already bot to bot. And so I do think that bot will play a more important role. Before joining KPMG, at a certain moment, I was working for the restructuring of a company in the glass industry. And they made glasses for beer. And it was one of those very interesting old industries with furnaces and raw materials and a lot of flames and smoke and so on. But it was also a company that was operating in a very, very competitive environment, a lot of restructuring and so on. And then at a certain point, I was working, of course, on the commercial development and how to get new clients and how to ensure business. And then I got involved in the process of procurement there. So, and then you see that clients, they work with a portal for bidding. And then we did all that design. We created new product lines. We had brochures. We had positioning. And then, of course, there is a big brewery. I'm not going to mention the name, but you can imagine one of the biggest breweries. They say, okay, we need 5 million beer glasses of a certain type. And then you go into a portal, and it is basically a bidding, which is electronically. So they say, okay, what is your best bid for this? And you give in an amount. And then it says, the portal, basically the bot says, you've been underbid, somebody is doing it cheaper. And then, okay, you only have 10 seconds left. Is somebody of the people in the call want to make a better bid? And then in the end, you really need to decide, because sometimes you go into something and then you actually say, hey, if we say now we do it, we are selling at a loss. And then you end up in all the traditional business economics, better to have something than having the production line to stop and so on. But this was already a couple of years ago. but in business to business. Of course, if you talk about selling more complex things, selling, for example, you asked a question about KPMG, selling the type of consultancy services that we that we sell. Well, the kind of consultancy service we like to sell, we prefer not to see them as a commodity.
Indeed.
But one of the things that we are also, of course, seeing and observing is that the number of traditional consultancy activities are getting commoditized. And I can imagine that there also in the procurement process and so on, it becomes something which is much more digitized. And you may end up in all those things. So one of the things that I also observe, and I'm quite certain that you've come to the same conclusion, we have the different parties that play a role in key account management and B2B selling, industrial selling, and so on. And at a certain point, procurement comes in.
Yeah.
And I remember that a couple of years ago, we had some very interesting discussions about the Klaljik matrix and the way purchasing is a very good inspiration to look at the more professional way of organizing sales. So at a certain point, procurement comes in. And I do see a lot of digitization in procurement. And there's also a lot of software and tools. And I have colleagues at KPMG who are implementing those things all over the world, bringing efficiency and digitization to the procurement process. On the other hand, to do this in an efficient way, you still need to invest before in education of your client, customer success, marketing, key account management, because it will not only bring you to the point of procurement, but it is not always about price and all the other elements. You need to build your reputation, you need to create the opportunity. But so there's a balance between both. But I think bots and digitization are there, whether you like it or not. And you need to see how you can work with them.
I love it, because at the end of the day, you're right? It might begin initially with commoditized services and products from a selling perspective, right? Because from a buying perspective as well, I can see much more openness in buying, because if a company is procuring, and I remember talking to a big hospital when we were doing research, where they said they work with at least 10,000 to 12,000 vendors, right? And they have a team of 12 to 13 procurement people. So essentially, they then classify it, and then certain things has to be digitized. Whereas in organizations, you have an army of salespeople. I'm exaggerating, right? Essentially, then you're talking about, hey, what are we going to do with them? And that brings me to my last question, which is, of course, the ethics of this, right? At the end of the day, the ethics, and where do you think that when you look at disruptive selling, when you see bot to bot selling and buying and things like that, what about ethics? Who is going to be responsible for making sure that we are saying the right things, we're using the customer's information correctly? And do you think that that is going to become a function that you're going to see in organizations in terms of not just data, but the data could be from the clients, right? Or it could be data from your employees, but even business practices, right? So even if you do everything by the book, you are going to make certain decisions that has an impact. So where should ethics be sitting here?
I think ethics should be very high on top of the list. I think in today's times, ethics is a key element of trust and of reliability. And ethics goes very broad. It is basically, what is it to do business with with your company? And it goes two ways. What we see is that there is an increasing number of companies that apply a client acceptance model. So that means that they're not going to sell to every company. And we know, of course, these things from certain industries, like traditionally arms industry, you're not going to sell arms to everybody. That's one thing. But we see that this is coming forward in more and more other businesses. Excuse me. Yes, sorry. I'm in an interview, just a minute. Yes. Deva, I seem to be, okay. Deva, sorry, I hope you can correct it, but there seem to be a number of people standing outside. But so ethics is an important element. It should be on top, because it is about the way you do business, and it is about the principles you use to work with companies. And for example, client acceptance is one of them. And also, it should be a guideline for your salespeople, your marketing people, what is the right thing and what is not the right thing.
Indeed.
Very
Perfect.
good.
I think, indeed. Thank you so much. I know that the interest of time.
No, very good, because now the people are very angry at me. So they gave me a meeting room, but it seems that there are 100 people waiting outside.
My apologies.
David, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Indeed. And again, stay tuned for the next steps as well. Thank you so much.
No, very good. David, thank you. I see you. Bye.
Bye.
Yes.